I never thought a happy party could turn into chaos. The room was filled with laughter, music, and clinking glasses until everything changed in a second. Out of nowhere, my sister-in-law grabbed a heavy vase and smashed it hard against my daughter's head. Her screams pierced the air. Before I could reach her, my sister-in-law struck again. This time his attack was even more devastating. Hello, my name is Elena Carter, and I am 35 years old. If you had asked me a month ago what my life was like, I would have told you it was ordinary but fulfilling. I work as a librarian at the Havensburg Public Library, a place I have loved ever since I was a child. It's where I met my husband, Daniel, 13 years ago. My job doesn't pay much, but I love it. The feeling of handing a child their first book, seeing their eyes light up with curiosity, it makes everything worth it. On that particular May afternoon, the sun poured through the large windows of the children's section, casting a golden glow on the bookshelves. The room smelled of paper, old and new, mixed with the light scent of lavender air freshener. "Miss Elena, what book will you read to us next?" a small voice asked. I smiled at the little boy in front of me. I had barely opened my mouth to answer when my phone vibrated on the desk. I glanced at the screen. Daniel. I hesitated. He rarely called me during work. "I'm sorry, kids. I need to take this call," I said gently before stepping away. As soon as I answered, Daniel's voice was tense. "Elena, Mom wants us to meet at that place." I felt my stomach tighten. That place meant Margaret's estate on Willow Street, the enormous Victorian mansion where my mother-in-law, Margaret Lancaster, lived. She was a well-respected woman in Havensburg society, but for the past 13 years, she had made one thing very clear. She disapproved of me as her son's wife. "All right," I said, exhaling slowly. "I'll head there after I pick up Mia from school." I ended the call, but the uneasiness remained. For 13 years, Margaret had treated me like an outsider, always reminding me, in her polite yet cutting way, that a librarian wasn't worthy of the Lancaster name. And worst of all, she treated Mia the same way. After finishing work, I drove to Havensburg Middle School to pick up Mia, my 12-year-old daughter. She was waiting by the school gate, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her long brown hair was tied into a simple ponytail, and her face brightened when she saw me, until she noticed the look on my face. "Mom?" she asked as she climbed into the passenger seat. "What's wrong?" I forced a small smile. "Nothing, sweetheart. We just have to make a quick stop before going home." Mia buckled her seatbelt. "Where?" I hesitated. "Your grandmother's house." The light faded from her expression. She stared out of the window, her hands gripping her backpack straps. "Oh," she murmured. I didn't blame her for feeling uneasy. Margaret had never been warm toward her either. While most grandmothers showered their grandchildren with love, Margaret only ever showed Mia cold indifference. She once told Daniel that Mia was library-raised, as if it was an insult. The drive to Willow Street was silent. The Lancaster estate was a towering Victorian mansion, its black iron gates standing tall against the early evening light. The long driveway led up to a house that looked like something out of a history book, beautiful, but intimidating. As we pulled up, I noticed a sleek black sports car already parked outside. Ashley's car. Ashley was Daniel's younger sister, 29 years old, and practically a replica of Margaret, cold, entitled, and always looking down on me. She worked in luxury real estate, which meant she spent most of her time flaunting expensive brands and talking about her latest investments. Mia sighed. "Aunt Ashley is here too?" I squeezed her hand reassuringly before stepping out of the car. "Let's just get this over with." The front door swung open before I could even knock. Ashley stood there, arms crossed, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my entire month's salary. Well, she said, her voice dripping with amusement. "Finally, you're here." Inside, the mansion was just as overwhelming as always. Huge chandeliers, grand staircases, and furniture that looked too expensive to touch. In the formal living room, Margaret sat with perfect posture, her presence as commanding as ever. Next to her sat Ryan Collins, Ashley's fiancé. A well-known corporate lawyer, he seemed more composed than his future wife, but something in his eyes looked uneasy. Then, Margaret spoke, her voice sharp and clipped. "You're late." I took a deep breath, keeping my expression neutral. "I was at work," I replied evenly. Margaret gave a thin-lipped smile, her sharp eyes scanning me like a critic inspecting a painting. "Of course. The library." She said it as if it were something distasteful. Daniel, my husband, was already sitting on the couch. He looked at me, then at Mia, his fingers laced together as if bracing himself for whatever was coming next. Ashley took a seat beside Ryan, tossing her designer handbag on the couch carelessly. Her expensive perfume filled the air as she flicked her long, manicured nails against her phone screen. Margaret reached for a small velvet box on the coffee table in front of her and opened it with a deliberate slowness. The moment she did, the room seemed to hold its breath. Inside the box sat a stunning diamond and sapphire bracelet, a masterpiece of glistening stones, carefully arranged in a delicate yet powerful design. It sparkled under the chandelier's glow, casting reflections across the polished marble floor. "This," Margaret said smoothly, "is the Lancaster family's heirloom, a bracelet that has been passed down for generations." I stared at it. The bracelet was breathtaking, but more than that, it was worth a fortune. Ashley leaned forward with a smug smile. "It's valued at $200,000. Mia's eyes widened slightly, though she remained silent. Margaret closed the box with a soft snap and looked at Ashley. "As the eldest daughter, this was meant for me," Ashley announced, her voice laced with arrogance. "And I will be wearing it at my wedding." Of course. This whole meeting was about the wedding. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, offering Ashley a weak smile. Something about his expression seemed off, but I couldn't place it. Margaret's gaze flickered toward Mia, then back to me. "Make sure your daughter understands that this bracelet is not something to be touched." The air in the room grew colder. I felt Mia stiffen beside me. The implication was clear. She thought Mia wasn't trustworthy enough to be near something so valuable. Anger simmered inside me, but I kept my voice steady. Mia would never touch something that isn't hers. Margaret's eyes held that same icy judgment. I would hope so. I clenched my jaw, resisting the urge to respond with something I'd regret. Instead, I gently squeezed Mia's hand, silently reassuring her. Daniel, as expected, said nothing. Ashley smirked. "Well, we'll see you both tomorrow at the church. Try not to be late this time." Margaret dismissed us with a simple wave of her hand. The conversation was over. As Mia and I left the mansion, I exhaled deeply, tension still knotted in my chest. I had no idea that this bracelet would soon become the center of a storm that would destroy the Lancaster family's reputation forever. The next day, the Lancaster wedding was set to take place at St. Helena's Cathedral, a grand old church in the heart of Havensburg. The sky was a clear, brilliant blue, sunlight streaming through the tall stained glass windows as guests filled the pews. The venue was extravagant, exactly as Margaret would have wanted. Dozens of high-profile guests from the city's elite had gathered, including corporate executives, lawyers, and politicians. Mia stood beside me in her pale pink dress, looking elegant yet nervous. She had been excited about the wedding, despite everything, but I could tell she was on edge. "Mom," she whispered as I adjusted her hair clip, "everything will go well today, right?" I smiled at her, though a faint unease gnawed at me. "Yes, sweetheart. It'll be a beautiful ceremony." Or at least, that's what I hoped. In the main hall, I spotted Ryan at the altar, dressed in a classic black tuxedo. He looked sharp, but his jaw was tight, his expression unreadable. Something felt off. Ashley, the bride, was still in the preparation room, making last-minute adjustments to her gown. Margaret was with her, overseeing everything like a royal advisor. Then, a loud, piercing scream echoed through the cathedral. The entire room went silent. My bracelet is gone." The voice belonged to Ashley. Within moments, Margaret, Ryan, and several guests rushed toward the preparation room, with Daniel, Mia and me following behind. Inside, Ashley stood in front of a luxurious vanity mirror, her face twisted in panic. Her hands were trembling, her perfectly manicured nails clutching the air as if trying to grab something invisible. "The bracelet," she gasped, turning toward the crowd forming at the doorway. "My diamond bracelet. Someone stole it." Gasps filled the room. Margaret's face turned pale. "What do you mean it's stolen?" "I left it right here on the dressing table while I was fixing my veil," Ashley insisted, pointing to the empty spot. "And now it's gone." Silence hung heavy in the air, tension crackling like an electric wire. Then, Ashley's wide eyes suddenly locked onto Mia. The shift was instant. Her face darkened with accusation. "That child," she shouted, her voice shaking with fury. A stunned murmur swept through the guests. Mia's eyes widened in shock. "What? No. I didn't. I saw her come into the room earlier," Ashley continued, pointing at my daughter with trembling fingers. "She took it. That girl stole my bracelet." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Margaret stepped forward, her expression cold and unforgiving. "Mia," she said slowly, voice edged with venom. "Is this true?" My heart pounded violently as I instinctively pulled Mia close to me. "No," Mia cried, her voice breaking. "I swear I didn't take anything." But the whispers had already begun. "A librarian's daughter?" someone muttered. "That's why she was here," another guest whispered. Margaret folded her arms, a cruel glint in her eyes. "It makes sense. People raised around books never have much money." Perhaps the temptation was too strong. A raw, fiery rage surged through me. "Mia would never steal from anyone," I said firmly, my voice shaking with restrained fury. "And you know that." But Ashley was already stepping forward, her face contorted in fury. "You little liar," she shrieked. Before I could react, she grabbed a porcelain vase from the vanity and swung it straight at Mia's head. The impact was brutal. The vase shattered instantly, and Mia collapsed to the floor with a cry of pain. Blood trickled down her forehead. The room froze. Gasps echoed through the cathedral, some in shock, others in horror. "Ashley!" Ryan shouted, his voice laced with disbelief. Daniel, who had been silent for far too long, finally snapped. His face twisted with fury as he stepped between Ashley and Mia. "Are you out of your mind?" he thundered. "You just hit a child." Ashley's chest heaved with rage, but before she could open her mouth, "Someone call the police." Daniel's voice boomed. The room remained frozen in shock, Ashley still panting with rage, her hands trembling. Mia lay on the floor, blood trickling from the cut on her forehead. I dropped to my knees, cradling my daughter's face as she whimpered in pain. "Sho, baby, I've got you," I whispered, my hands shaking as I wiped the blood from her skin. Meanwhile, Daniel stood firm, his eyes burning with anger. I said, "Someone call the police," he demanded again, his voice thundering through the room. A hushed murmur swept through the guests. No one had ever seen Daniel Lancaster, Margaret's son, the man who had always avoided confrontation, this furious before. Ashley took a step back, her confidence faltering for the first time. She's lying. She stole my bracelet." But then, a new voice cut through the chaos. "No, she didn't." Everyone turned. Ryan stood there, his jaw clenched, his expression one of pure disgust. "Ashley, stop lying," he said coldly. "We both know what really happened." Ashley's face twisted in shock. "What? Ryan, what are you talking about?" Ryan turned to the gathered crowd, taking a deep breath before speaking. "I wasn't going to say anything," he admitted. "I wanted to handle this privately. But after what you just did, Ashley, after you hit a child, you deserve to be exposed." The room fell silent again. Ryan reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times before lifting it for everyone to see. "Here's what actually happened." Then he hit play. A video began playing, security footage from the cathedral's bridal preparation room. The recording showed Ashley standing by the dressing table, nervously looking over her shoulder. Then, She grabbed the diamond bracelet and stuffed it into her own designer handbag. Gasps erupted through the crowd. Margaret's face drained of color. Ryan let the video continue, and a few moments later, Ashley suddenly let out a fake scream, just seconds before the guests arrived. Then he stopped the video and looked around the room. Ashley stole her own bracelet, Ryan announced with an icy glare. She wanted everyone to believe it had been stolen so she could file an insurance claim and get the money. She knew she couldn't afford her luxury condo payments, so she came up with this disgusting scheme. A heavy silence fell. Ashley's mouth opened and closed, her entire body frozen in place. Margaret, meanwhile, slowly turned to her daughter, her expression unreadable. You lied," she asked, her voice trembling. Ashley shook her head wildly. "No. That video, it's fake. Ryan, you're my fiancé. You're supposed to be on my side." Ryan let out a bitter laugh. "I was. Until you turned into a monster." Ashley's face twisted in rage. That little brat must have snuck in, and Daniel had heard enough. "You framed my daughter," he growled, stepping forward. "You hit my daughter. And now, you expect us to believe more of your lies?" He pulled out his own phone and dialed. Within seconds, he was speaking to the police. "Yes, I'd like to report an assault and a fraudulent insurance scheme," he said firmly. "We have evidence." Ashley stumbled backward, panic setting in. "Mom," she cried, looking at Margaret. "You're not going to let them do this to me, are you?" Margaret didn't respond. She was staring at Ashley, her lips pressed together so tightly they had turned white. For the first time in her life, Margaret Lancaster looked powerless. Then, the sound of sirens filled the air. Ashley gasped, her eyes widening. "No, no, no." Two police officers strode into the room, their expressions unreadable. One of them, a tall man with a badge that read Detective Harlan, stepped forward. "Miss Ashley Lancaster?" he asked, his voice cold. Ashley froze. "You're under arrest for assaulting a minor, filing a false police report, and attempting to commit insurance fraud." The room exploded into whispers. Margaret gasped, but this time, she did not step in to save her daughter. The second officer pulled out a pair of silver handcuffs. Ashley's legs buckled. "No, no, you can't do this." Ryan, please." Ryan simply looked away. And then, the officer snapped the handcuffs around Ashley's wrists. "You have the right to remain silent," Detective Harlan said as he started reading her rights. Ashley screamed. "No, you can't do this to me. I'm a Lancaster." But no one listened. As the officers began leading her out of the church, her screams faded into the distance. And just like that, Ashley Lancaster was gone. As the police officers dragged Ashley away, her screams echoed down the cathedral halls. The guests, once eager to be part of an elite wedding, now stood in stunned silence. Some whispered among themselves, while others stared at Margaret Lancaster, waiting to see how the formidable matriarch would react. I gently wiped the blood from Mia's forehead, my heart still pounding from the chaos. My daughter clung to me, shaken but strong, while Daniel kept a protective arm around us both. Margaret hadn't moved. She stood in the center of the room, her perfect posture rigid, her expression frozen like a statue. For 13 years, she had controlled everything. Her family, her reputation, the people around her. Now, in a matter of minutes, it had all unraveled. Then, Ryan broke the silence. "Margaret," he said coolly, all respect gone from his voice. "Did you know about this?" Margaret blinked once, as if coming back to reality. Her throat tightened. "Of course not," she murmured, but her voice lacked conviction. Ryan laughed bitterly. "I don't believe you." A murmur spread through the guests. Daniel stepped forward, his voice firm. "Mom, did you know Ashley was planning this?" Margaret looked at him, her own son, and for a split second, her mask slipped. That was all we needed to know. She hadn't just known. She had helped cover it up. Gasps erupted across the room. "You're going to let Mia take the blame," I said softly, my voice filled with disbelief. Margaret's fingers twitched at her sides, but she said nothing. You are going to let my 12-year-old daughter be humiliated. I repeated, my voice rising. You are going to let her be branded a thief, just to protect Ashley. Margaret lifted her chin, her expression regaining some of its usual coldness. This family has a reputation to uphold. My breath caught. That was it. That was all we ever were to her. Not family. Not individuals. Just pieces in her carefully curated reputation. Daniel's jaw clenched. I don't want anything to do with you anymore, he said. Margaret's eyes widened, just for a moment. You don't mean that. I do, Daniel said, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. This ends today. You are not my mother anymore. Margaret inhaled sharply, but for once, she had no words. Then, as if fate itself was working against her, the police radio crackled in the background. This is Officer Langston. A new voice came through. We have confirmation. Margaret Lancaster is also under investigation for tax fraud and aiding in a false police report. Please advise. The entire room gasped. Margaret's head snapped up, her face draining of color. No, she whispered, her voice finally breaking. Detective Harlan stepped forward. Margaret Lancaster, you are under investigation for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and financial fraud. You will need to come with us for questioning. The guests erupted into whispers. Margaret, the untouchable Margaret Lancaster, was finally exposed. She staggered back, as if reality was crashing down on her all at once. This is ridiculous, she muttered, her voice hollow. I am Margaret Lancaster. The detective didn't wait. Two officers stepped forward, grabbing her by the arms. Margaret didn't scream like Ashley. She simply stared ahead, her hands shaking violently. As she was led away, her gaze briefly met mine. For the first time in 13 years, I saw fear in her eyes. Then she was gone. After Margaret and Ashley's arrests, Havensburg erupted with news of the scandal. Headlines dominated every major news outlet and social media platform. Prominent business family falls, mother and daughter caught in criminal scandal. $200,000 bracelet theft and false accusation case shocks the city. 12-year-old girl framed and assaulted. Justice prevails. Those who once admired Margaret and Ashley now distance themselves. Margaret's power and influence were gone. The Lancaster name, once synonymous with wealth and prestige, had become a symbol of fraud and disgrace. The day of the trial arrived, and as I walked into the Havensburg courthouse, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief, anxiety, determination. This was it, the final step. The grand courtroom was filled with people, reporters, former associates of the Lancasters, and onlookers eager to see justice served. Margaret and Ashley sat at the defendant's table, their once arrogant expressions replaced with sheer exhaustion. Ashley looked the worst. Her flawless, polished exterior was gone, replaced by dark circles under her eyes and a nervous, twitching hand tapping against the table. Margaret, on the other hand, sat eerily still, her fingers laced together like a woman who had nothing left to say. I took a seat beside Daniel, who held Mia's hand. She squeezed mine tightly, her small fingers trembling. You okay, sweetheart? I whispered. She nodded, but I could tell she was nervous. This was the day she would finally get her justice. The judge entered, and the trial began. The prosecutor laid out the evidence against Ashley in devastating detail. CCTV footage, witness statements, the fraudulent insurance claim. One by one, the facts came out, and each piece felt like another nail in Ashley's coffin. The moment that shook the room the most? The footage of her attacking Mia. As the video played, I heard the gasps echoing through the courtroom. The sight of a grown woman smashing a vase on a 12-year-old girl's head was sickening. Mia tensed beside me, lowering her head slightly. I wrapped an arm around her protectively. Ashley looked humiliated. She stared at the table, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. The insurance company's investigator testified next, explaining how Ashley had staged the bracelet theft to claim insurance money, a desperate move to cover her luxury condo payments. It was undeniable. She was guilty. The judge turned to Ashley. Do you have anything to say for yourself before sentencing? Ashley shot up from her seat, her face red with anger. This isn't fair, she shouted. I'm a Lancaster. I can't go to prison. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. I exhaled slowly. She still didn't understand. The judge looked unimpressed. Miss Lancaster, your status means nothing in this courtroom. What matters here is the law, and you broke it. The verdict came swiftly. Ashley was sentenced to 5 years in prison. She was fined $500,000, with a large portion going toward compensation for Mia. Her assets were liquidated, her condo repossessed, her designer clothes and luxury cars auctioned off. Her bank accounts were frozen, leaving her completely bankrupt. As the bailiffs approached her, Ashley's expression twisted in pure horror. You can't do this, she shrieked. Mom, do something. Margaret didn't even look at her. Ashley's screams followed her out of the courtroom as she was led away in handcuffs. The courtroom grew colder as Margaret's case began. Her crimes weren't just about helping Ashley's lies. She had years of hidden financial fraud under her name. The IRS investigator presented damning evidence, documents proving she had evaded taxes for over a decade, funneling money into offshore accounts and fake business ventures. Then came the testimony that sealed her fate. A former Lancaster family accountant, now turned whistleblower. He testified under oath. Margaret Lancaster used her wealth to control everyone around her. She thought she was untouchable, but in the end, she destroyed her own empire. Margaret remained silent, expressionless, but I saw it, the slight tremor in her hands, the way her jaw tightened. She was afraid. The judge turned to her. Margaret Lancaster, do you have any final words? For a moment, I thought she might beg for mercy, but instead, she lifted her chin and said, I regret nothing. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge sighed and delivered the final verdict. Margaret was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Her estate, including the Lancaster mansion, was seized. Her bank accounts were frozen, leaving her with nothing. Unlike Ashley, Margaret didn't scream. She simply stood up, adjusted her expensive coat, and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. For the first time, she had lost control. It was finally over. As we walked out of the courthouse, Mia looked up at me. Mom, it's really done, isn't it? She asked softly. I smiled and kissed the top of her head. Yes, sweetheart. It's over. Daniel took a deep breath, then let it out, his shoulders lighter than I had ever seen them. No more Lancasters, he said. No more looking over our shoulders. I looked at my husband and daughter, the people who truly mattered. We weren't just free from Margaret and Ashley. We were finally free to live. A month after the trial, life was peaceful. Mia was happy. She smiled more. She laughed more. Daniel had become the father Mia always needed. He spent time with her, protected her, and never hesitated to stand up for her again. And me? I returned to my job at Havensburg Public Library, where I truly belonged. One quiet afternoon, I was shelving books when a group of children ran up to me. Miss Elena. Miss Elena. I turned, smiling. What's up, little bookworms? Mia stood among them, grinning proudly. Mom, can I do today's storytelling? She asked. I looked at her, my brave, strong daughter, the girl who had faced so much and still stood tall. Of course, sweetheart, I said, stepping aside. Mia took a deep breath, then turned to the children, opening a book. Today's story is called The Truth Always Comes Out. As she began to read, sunlight streamed through the library's tall windows, casting a golden glow over the room. The Lancaster name had fallen, but we had risen. And this was our happy ending.